Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you are familiar with this? Seen that before and heard that sound a few times? Okay. I was very familiar with this growing up. Anytime there was a storm outside or the cable went out or you couldn't just line up the bunny ears quite right, we would get this static just like that all the time. But how many of you know exactly what this is? In spring of 1964, two researchers at Bell Labs observed a persistent hiss while testing their microwave radiation detector. And regardless of where they pointed the antenna, the static was just always there. They kept picking up this static, and it's the very same static that causes TV interference. So every time you get snow on your television, whether you're using satellite or cable or whatever, that's what it's from. And those men, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, theorized that this electromagnetic radiation, also called cosmic microwave background radiation, is a remnant from the inception of our universe. And nearly 30 years later, in 1992, a team of astrophysicists led by University of California's George Smoot launched the COBE satellite in order to take precise measurements of this background radiation. And the results confirmed Penzias and Wilson's theory and just stunned the scientific world. Stephen Hawking called it the scientific discovery of the century, if not all time. And Smoot himself excitedly stated to newspaper reporters, "What we have found is evidence for the birth of the universe." If you're religious, he said, it's like looking at God. Astounded by the news, Ted Koppel began his ABC Nightline television program with an astronomer quoting the first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Such discoveries have tremendous significance for you and for me, even though we might not realize it at the time. I mean, John's talk about looking at the mountains and how beautiful and amazing they are, and yet getting so accustomed to it, I related to well because I've wondered the same thing about the stars. We go outside and we look at the stars, and every once in a while you pause and you notice how beautiful and immense and amazing our galaxy is, and yet day after day we walk right by it and we never pay any attention. But I mean, who hasn't, at least at some point in their life, spent a quiet moment gazing into the night sky, overwhelmed by the sheer vastness of the cosmos, and contemplated your own existence? I mean, why is there something rather than nothing? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone in the universe? Is there some grand design, or is it all just one colossal cosmic accident? One of the things I love about the Bible is that it offers answers to our questions about life, the universe, and everything. And right from the very first verse, it attempts to answer life's biggest questions. But is it the right answer? In an age of scientific enlightenment, can we take Genesis 1:1 seriously, or is it just wishful thinking? Today and for the next couple of weeks, I'd like to put Genesis 1 to the test, starting with this very first verse, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Is that really true? And how can we know? Well, as far as I can tell, there are only three possible explanations for the existence of our universe. Three theories that have been put forward at various times in human thought as to why there is something rather than nothing. And I'd like to examine each one of those this morning. First, the first possible explanation is that the universe is constant. The universe is constant. In other words, the universe is just eternal. It's always been there, and it always will be. And prior to the 1920s, this was the dominant view, dating as far back as ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle, who said it is impossible that movement should ever come into being or cease to be, for it must always have existed, nor can time come into being or cease to be. At least that's what Aristotle thought. And similarly, most scientists also assume that the cosmos was constant, unchanging, and eternal. And this was the assumption of Albert Einstein when he began to apply his new theory of gravity, called the general theory of relativity, to the universe back in 1917, so 100 years ago. But Einstein quickly realized that something didn't add up. His equations began to describe a universe that was either blowing up like a balloon or else collapsing in on itself. However, Einstein believed firmly that the universe was eternal, like most scientists of his age. And so he did what any red-blooded super genius would do. He fudged the numbers. He invented imaginary numbers to use in his equations so that they would still work and keep the universe eternal. But then, once experiments proved that the universe really was expanding, Einstein admitted his error, calling it the biggest blunder of his career. And since that time, thanks to astonishing developments in modern astronomy, we now have strong scientific evidence that the universe had an absolute beginning, what's commonly referred to as the Big Bang. In the 1920s, Russian mathematician Alexander Friedman and Belgian astronomer George Latimer developed models of this expanding universe based on Einstein's equations. And these predictions were confirmed in 1929 by the American astronomer Edwin Hubble, for whom the Hubble telescope is named after. And these predictions were demonstrated by this red shift that Edwin Hubble observed in the light coming from distant galaxies, which indicated that they're getting further and further away. And so as you trace the expansion of the universe backwards in time, the universe gets smaller and smaller until the distance between any 2 points is 0. And at that point, what's often called the singularity, you've reached the absolute boundary of space and time. And this standard Big Bang model, which is almost universally accepted among astronomers and astrophysicists, thus predicts an absolute beginning to the universe. And as if that were not enough, we also have added confirmation from the field of thermodynamics. Now, you're all familiar with the second law of thermodynamics, right? Right? Okay, well, you're probably more familiar with it than you realize. Let's say you walk into the fellowship hall over here and there's a whole bunch of us mixing and mingling, and there's a steaming hot cup of coffee on the table. And you, being the kind, thoughtful person that you are, you pick it up and ask, does this belong to anybody? And I tell you, no, that's been sitting there for the past month. Well, you would know immediately that I was either wrong or lying, probably lying, right? Because there's no way that that cup of coffee could still be hot if it was sitting there for a month. It would have long since cooled off and become room temperature. Well, that is the second law of thermodynamics in action. This law states that everything continually moves from a state of order to disorder, and that heat and energy dissipate over time. It's like everything evens out over time is the idea. And this law has been verified by proof after scientific proof, and it's never been shown to be inaccurate in any way. Now let's apply this law to the universe the way that cosmologists do. If the universe was eternal, then it would have long since gone cold and lifeless. The stars would have burned out, planets would have broken up and become clouds of dust. Even black holes would have ceased to vacuuming the universe of unsightly stars and planets. When you see flaming suns and scorching meteors, in other words, you're looking at a steaming cup of coffee that over infinite time would have long since turned room temperature. And since the universe is still full of pockets of heat and energy, it cannot be eternal. And so the cosmological evidence for an absolute beginning to the universe is insurmountable. On the basis of scientific and philosophical evidence, which I didn't even get into, we have more than enough reason to believe that the universe began to exist, and therefore the universe is not constant. So how else might we explain the origin of our universe? Well, believe it or not, some physicists have recently proposed that the universe is essentially causeless. causeless. That is to say, the universe simply sprang into existence for no reason whatsoever from nothing. Now, common sense and scientific evidence tell you that you can't get something from nothing. To claim that something can literally come into being from nothing it's worse than magic. I mean, when a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat, at least you've got the magician, right? Not to mention the hat. But nobody sincerely believes that bunnies just pop into existence out of nothing, completely uncaused. And the same reason we don't believe that horses or an Eskimo village can just pop into being without a cause. I think Maria said it well in The Sound of Music when she told Captain Von Trapp, nothing comes from nothing and nothing ever could. Or put another way, there's just no free lunches. The conditions that hold true in our universe preclude the possibility of matter springing uncaused out of nothing. And yet, amazingly, in order to avoid the alternative, that's exactly what some atheists claim. Lawrence Krauss has made millions with his book, A Universe from Nothing, which really does nothing other than redefine nothing as something, and then just confuse everybody who reads it. But similarly, Richard Dawkins wrote in his book, The Ancestor's Tale, the fact that life evolved out of nearly nothing some 10 billion years after the universe evolved literally out of nothing is a fact so staggering that I would be mad to attempt words to justify it. Quentin Smith of Western Michigan University has likewise claimed that the most rational position to hold is that the universe simply came from nothing, by nothing, for nothing. It sounds like the Gettysburg Address for atheists. But even the brilliant physicist Stephen Hawking, before his death, espoused this view in his book, The Grand Design, where he states, because there is such a thing as the law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Now, when someone as intelligent as Stephen Hawking makes a statement like that, people have a tendency to buy into it just because of who said it. But John Lennox, a professor of mathematics and philosophy at Oxford University, has demonstrated that there's not one or two, but actually 3 levels of self-contradiction contained in that one sentence. And it all just boils down to circular reasoning, prompting John Lennox to conclude, nonsense remains nonsense even when taught by world-famous scientists. Ray Comfort, in his book, Nothing Created Everything, The Scientific Impossibility of Atheistic Evolution, writes this. He says, anyone who tries to actually justify that nothing created everything has to be insane. This is a scientific impossibility. And he continues, there's just no way to say it kindly, but such thoughts show that the atheist doesn't think, and proves that the Bible is right when it says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And I think Ray Comfort's onto something. Common sense and scientific evidence confirm that nothing comes from nothing, and nothing ever could. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. And the universe began to exist, therefore it follows logically and inescapably that the universe must have a cause. And that brings us to the one last possible explanation for the universe, that the universe is created. Remarkably, the universe itself, I think, offers tremendous insight into the cause of the universe. First of all, we know that whatever caused the universe must transcend the universe. That is to say, since we know, unlike Stephen Hawking, that the universe can't create itself, because in order to create yourself, you would have to exist before you created yourself, and then why did you create yourself if you already existed? It's just nonsense. So whatever caused the universe has to transcend the universe, be outside the universe. And since cosmology tells us that literally all of space, matter, and energy, and even time itself came into being at the Big Bang, then whatever caused the universe must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. That is, a non-physical entity that exists outside of time. And it must also be unimaginably powerful, since it caused all matter and energy to spring into existence. So we've got a spaceless, timeless, immaterial entity of immense power But if we look a little closer at our universe, we can learn a little bit more about this cause. Astronomers have been stunned by the discovery of how complex and delicate a balance of initial conditions must have been present at the Big Bang itself if the universe is to permit the existence of intelligent life anywhere in the cosmos. And this delicate balance of initial conditions has come to be known as the fine-tuning of the universe for life. And the fine-tuning of the universe includes constants within the laws of physics, like the force of gravity and the electromagnetic force and subatomic force. It also includes various arbitrary quantities, like the ratio of protons to neutrons in the universe, and the expansion rate of the universe, the cosmological constant, and many, many others. Just one example of a finely tuned constant is the strong nuclear force, or the force that holds atoms together. Now, stars burn by fusing hydrogen atoms together. And when two hydrogen atoms are fused, 0.7% of the mass of the hydrogen is converted into energy. If the amount of matter converted were slightly smaller, say 0.6% instead of 0.7%, a proton could not bond to a neutron, and the universe would consist only of hydrogen. Like the entire universe would just be nothing but hydrogen. Now, with no heavy elements, there would be no rocky planets, no life, nothing. So if the matter, or the amount of matter converted, were slightly larger, say 0.8%, fusion would happen so readily and rapidly that no hydrogen would have survived the Big Bang itself. And again, there would be no solar systems, no planets, no life at all. The amount of mass converted into energy has to be exactly 0.7% for anything to exist. And that's just one example. And there are literally dozens of these constants and quantities that are precisely balanced to allow chemistry to take place, to allow stars to burn, allow galaxies to form. And if any of these variables were altered by even a hair's breadth, life could not exist anywhere in the universe. Now, let me share an illustration that I first learned from Robert Collins, doctor of both physics and philosophy. He said, imagine that you're on a manned space flight to Mars. And when you land, you immediately see this impressive architectural structure, and inside you find 12 dials that control everything from oxygen levels to temperature to gravity and so on. And the dials have this huge range of possible settings, but each one of them has been carefully calibrated so that life is flourishing inside the structure. Now, there's a barren wasteland and nothing alive outside, but inside it's just like home here on Earth. Now, you'd undoubtedly conclude that some intelligent beings created this place, but even more so, you might reasonably conclude that they knew you were coming and they prepared a place just for you. And thus, what we know about the universe that we live in tells us that whatever caused it is a transcendent, spaceless, immaterial, unimaginably powerful, highly intelligent, personal creator who crafted the cosmos with us in mind. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds an awful lot like the God of the Bible to me. And since the cosmos cannot be constant, nor can it be causeless, there's only one other option. It's the one articulated in the first chapter of the first book of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In an age of scientific enlightenment, nothing could be more certain, clear, or correct. The Bible gets it right from the very first verse. And I've always liked the way Abraham Lincoln put it. He said, I can see how it might be possible for a man to look down on the earth and be an atheist, but I cannot conceive of how he could look up into the heavens and say there is no God. I want to encourage everyone this week to just maybe go out on your porch on a clear night and look up at the heavens, gaze into the galaxies, and just stand in awe of the creator of it all. And I also want to prompt you to maybe come back next week with a pen and paper and be ready to take some notes as we dive a little deeper into Genesis 1 and discover a bit more about our origins. In the meantime, whatever journey you're on, whatever struggles you're facing, whatever questions you might have, I want to urge you to do exactly what Genesis 1:1 does. Begin with God. God has to be in the beginning, and everything else will make sense. And if I can help you figure out how to do that, then just come talk with me. You can pull me aside after church, or you can call me at home, or you can come forward now while we stand and sing together. Let's sing, church.